McNinch, and Secretary Ken Mayer. I'll start with Commissioner McNinch.
All right. I'll simply say Hawaii is a tough place to go be in a meeting, but we did attend a lot of meetings, just so everybody knows, and we're going to try to be a little succinct so we're not here for the rest of the day. Jack and I did split up, so we did go to different venues. There were times where we were both in the commissioners' meeting, and but Jack had opportunity to go to some sage-grouse meetings and to some mule deer and bighorn sheep, and I spent some time in the commissioners' meetings. There was a joint director-commissioner meeting, and then I spent some time in a human dimension meeting. So between the two of us, we got into quite a few arenas and pulled back. So we're going to tag team just a little bit. The commission meetings are generally focused on providing an array of state reports. So every state generates a report. They generally put them in writing. I've got a couple of examples with me if people are interested. Nevada does it as well. We don't spend a ton of time talking about those reports specifically. There was a time where they took up 2 days worth of discussions. But the commissioners retreat or group has, they've kind of redefined themselves, and they take the opportunity to learn about specific issues. So the state reports, a lot of states, and I'd see the common thing, there's a lot going on with wolves, okay, and we're going to kind of leave it at that. Nevada's kind of right in the middle of it. You know, there's stuff going on north of us, and there's stuff going on south of us, and there's a lot of ramifications. But a big discussion was on wolves. That was a big issue. What the commissioners do is that in January, before the summer meeting, they'll pick a number of topics. They'll pick 2 or 3 issues, and then a state will take the lead on putting together a discussion on those. And Arizona kind of filled the gap this time, and the 3 that were chosen in January were wild horse and burros, use of social media, and the North American model of wildlife management. And I got to give big props to Arizona. They stepped up, and I thought they did a really nice job on the presentations, trying to put some points and some things together for discussion. I'm going to hold off on talking about the wild horse and burro stuff. Jack, maybe we can handle that when Elmer gives his update, because there is a little bit to talk about right there that's worth a few minutes of discussion and updating. And I won't go too much into the use of social media. Suffice it to say that times are changing. People receive their information a lot differently than they used to. The print type stuff, not going to cut it anymore. And the Department of Wildlife's right in the thick of things with their Facebook and their Twitters, and there's a lot of other things. So, I mean, bottom line is I think the Department of Wildlife is doing a pretty good job of keeping up with that stuff for what I know of it. At the Joint Director and Commissioners meeting, there was an additional presentation on the North American model of wildlife management. That was a big theme of the conference. I think that you can feel that the tides change. I kind of made reference to it earlier. Idaho and Arizona are holding wildlife summits to get a feel for what's going on around them with their public and their communities. The Joint Directors meeting, dedicated funding for full taxonomic spectrum was somewhat of a theme, and it's kind of playing into this concept that times are changing and agencies. The alternate funding, it's always been a discussion, but it's getting to be a little bit more significant all the time. It's building momentum in terms of agencies have got to find ways to find that broad base of support to continue pulling with their missions. And real brief update on the state wildlife grants. They've been sitting at $90 million. That's the money that comes through the Wildlife Diversity Program, the Wildlife Action Plan that we talk about. That was as high as $90 million. In the last couple of years, it's dropped to $62 million. So you can see the impact that's having. From a how do you tie them together? I probably need more time. I'll be very careful here. I think that for me, it was really important for me to hear about the North American model, put it in perspective, and it gives me a feeling for maybe why we're at where we're at and some of the things that we're seeing. It's in its 75th year. It was created out of crisis. I think that's fair enough to say. It was created out of crisis. We had species going extinct, heath hens, passenger pigeons, there were a number of others, and sportsmen saw a need to step up and stabilize the loss of these populations, and hence the excise tax on the sporting goods and things of that nature. The PR is what it is at Pittman Robertson, and that money is that system is very much in place today. Of course, we all know that. The challenge is times have changed. Things have changed, and that system has been carrying a pretty heavy load for a very long time, and it's not quite as it was back in 1937 when it was developed, when it was put into place. So I think that the kind of the theme of the presentation was we need to start asking, what do we want our wildlife agencies to look like? Where are we headed here? And we really need to take a broad look at that and take that 30,000-foot level and have a real honest, hard discussion about what it is and where things fit in today. I'm trying to boil this stuff down, so I might have had some things I was going to say that, so I don't want people to. The human dimension stuff that I went to, they did a baseline, there was baseline work done by WAFWA in 2004 that did an initial evaluation of the wildlife values and attitudes in the West. They're coming up on the 10 years of doing that, and the goal is to do another survey and see how those numbers have changed. And I've got a couple of small handouts. I really would like to see us get into a discussion, have somebody that can lead that discussion. I don't know if Department of Wildlife had a human dimensions person. They left for greener pastures or wherever they went, and department, of course, with the budget, it's just not a position that's going to get funded immediately. But I really do believe that it's where we're going to be able to determine really where we're at, how, what we're dealing with, what we're talking about. I'll use two examples. In the 2004 study, it was Nevada had they broke people into 4 different groups, and the two that stand out most to me are the utilitarian, the folks that find that believe that wildlife have proper uses, properly managed, but that wildlife are there for people to use in a utilitarian type of way. And then there's a group that is referred to as mutualists, and these are the folks that humanize animals, that believe that individual animals have feelings towards people, and there's strong relationships. And I don't want people to be distracted by that thought process, because there's other aspects of the dimension work that was done. But those numbers are equal in Nevada. Okay, so from a broad standpoint, that might explain part of what we're dealing with right now. We've had just a real quiet group of people out there that are got inflamed a little bit. Now here we are, and I think it's important for us to recognize that, because this talks about. I'll just read the small quote. Mutualists are less likely to support actions resulting in death or harm to wildlife, and more likely to engage in welfare-enhancing behaviors for individual wildlife. For example, feeding. I know that's hard to start opening that the mind to that because of what we've been through. But I think the point is that there's a large portion of our population in Nevada that have a very opposite thought process, and we need to understand that, not so that we can acquiesce, because that's a term that's been used, but so we know how to properly manage it. And I think that that's really important. And then there's a large group of people right out in the middle that have various thoughts and varied thoughts that it's real important to know them. So kind of the take home was, we monitor our wildlife populations, and the same concept applies to the public that we're serving. We need to monitor them and find out what's going on with them and how their thoughts are changing and their values are changing, just like we do with our wildlife populations. So, Ken, I hope that we're supportive of the. I don't know what happened ultimately with that human dimension work that's going forward. I know that it gives us a, it continues to give us a baseline on how things are changing. And the reason why this is important, and I'll throw out the main example for me. Arizona, they have a gentleman in Arizona that has been doing a lot of pulling a lot of information out of most of the western states, and in every state but two, one's not even part of WAFWA. He's been able to identify a cohort that's moving through time. Okay, and that cohort is pretty much the people in this room. Okay, a cohort of sportsmen that have been heavily involved and continue to have a strong, stable commitment to sportsmen's interest in particular. Okay, and as that cohort moves through time, you can see it moving through time on the graph. It's stable, it's intact, and it's moving through. As that group is getting older, there's forgot the term, but there's loss, okay, through death and ability to participate, and there's some changing interests. And the thing here is, and we talk about retention and recruitment, there's nothing going in behind it to take its place. And that has impact on the North American model of wildlife management and spending money and PR money coming through. And so what's happening is that there's this big increase in efforts to recruit, retain hunters, archers, et cetera, but it's not showing up on the charts. It's not showing up. So the effort's there, and people are still coming into the system, but it's not showing up like the cohort that's been carrying the load for all these years. And the guy's theory, and it made a lot of sense to me, was that in the next 7 to 20 years, when that cohort moves through, that's where if things aren't done and we don't take a different look at how things are done, that's where we're going to see our really start seeing our impacts. And man, it seemed sound enough to me. I mean, it is, it's being done through Colorado State University, and we've got people that are unbiased, in my opinion, managing this. Just seeing that alone, it's not worth the risk to me to not evaluate things. So that's why you're going to see me over the next few months and few meetings, really trying to figure out how to look into that, how to process it, because I don't know that any of us really can right now. And that's what I kind of got out of it, was there's a real need to find out how do we process it? What does it all mean? Because I think in 7 to 20 years, when that cohort moves through, I think the potential for there to be devastating consequences is very high, and I don't know that retention and recruitment is really going to be the answer to it. I'm not convinced of that right now. So I think it works. I think it's helpful. I think it's helping, but it's not filling that huge void that this group's going to leave when they run through the system. So anyway, that's my report. And
the other thing that was very striking, the graphs, there is very little difference between California and Nevada.
You got it. It's right here. I'll pass it around. You guys can take a look at it.
And you live in northern Nevada, and you have a northern rural perspective, but that's not the majority of population. And when they do the random samples, and you look at the graph, and you see this towards mutualism, you see California way up there, and Nevada's just barely below it.
It's an interesting read, and I know it's heavy to process. I'm into that kind of stuff anyway. Poor Scott's down here thinking, yeah, more study and more evaluation and more research, and I understand that, but this stuff, number one, it does intrigue me. I do think there's a lot of value in it. Do I think we need to spend millions of dollars doing it? No. But I wish there was a way to really take advantage of some of the opportunities that might be out there, and it's interesting. It tells us a lot of interesting stuff. The public in general, we took advantage of Part B of the study back in 2004, which was to have a little more work done in Nevada, a little more specific to Nevada. And I think one of those was there's general, the public is generally behind the control of, I'll just use it as an example, of predators. Okay, they're generally, they're accepting of it, you know. Hey, yeah, coyotes cause problems. They eat cats, they eat dogs, they, you know, and the public. But how you do that had everything to do with their level of support. Everything to do with their level of support. If you're using one method over another, and they perceive, you know, they have certain perceptions about certain methods, you know, it will make a difference on really how much they're going to support you here. I find it valuable. I find it interesting, and it's just how do you incorporate it into a management of an organization that has an incredible amount of responsibility. How do you incorporate it into your performance measures and your goals and all that other stuff? It's difficult, but so anyway, I probably took too much time.
No, we're good. We're good. A few things I'd like to add, like Commissioner McNinch said. He would go to the commission meeting, and I would try to hit some different committee meetings, like the sheep committee and the mule deer working group committee. One thing I bring back from that, and I want everybody to know, is our biologist, Mike Cox, was at the sheep meeting, and Tony Walsley's at the mule deer meeting. Our biologists are very, very, very well respected there. I mean, they're not just participants; they're seen as leaders in those two groups. We have some of the best biologists going, without a doubt. And you can see that when their peers interact with them. We're lucky to have those two individuals that went over there. Some stuff that the mule deer working group is working on, they're developing a series of white papers on things like deer feeding, road mortalities. They did a big presentation on movement corridors and how highways affect them through collaring and GPS and mortalities, and they're coming up with some good stuff. They haven't published it yet. They're going to use these for white papers that they can give to sister agencies like Department of Transportation in their own states, to the U.S. Forest Service and the BLM on land management activities, to other cooperators through different means. It's basically a white paper that other people can refer to on multiple topics. It's going to be just a library of information condensed that is usable to other agencies, and I believe that's a fantastic way to go. I did get to see them. They asked that they're not finalized and been signed off yet, so they're not ready to be distributed, so I won't be doing that at this time. When it comes to bighorn sheep, without a doubt, with the number of die-offs we have in Nevada and the things we have in Nevada and the problems we've had, our problems outweigh every other state combined. But we're still their envy because we have more sheep than most states combined. So we're seen as kind of at the spearhead of a lot of things when it comes to bighorn sheep. The one thing that I have taken away from the winter meeting and the summer meeting in WAFWA is it's a group that you need to get into, and you need to have some repetition of commissioners going, the same commissioner. I think that everybody should see it, but at the winter meeting, I didn't really know anybody. You spend a meeting, at least probably two, trying to get your feet on the ground, make contacts, and then you can start going someplace. And that's what I got out of the commissioners' forums that I went to, is the commissioners want to go someplace now as a group. And we have to do that through the directors. But one thing that was said there by Jack from Arizona is we're all commissioners for a reason. We love wildlife, but the reason we're commissioners, we have some type of contact with our state governor. So Ken works for the governor, but we have a total different relationship with our governor. And so we need to help Ken take his message to the governor. But not only that, where we're falling short and what they want to work on is not our message to the governor. It's our message to our governor. They take their same message to their governor, and we get 15 western states to take the same message on wolves, cheatgrass, sage grouse, wild horses. Take a different approach, you know, kind of a group approach at this. We all have our ideas. We all know what we want to do, but we're not near as effective as we could be working as individuals. And I think that if we can get people, you know, commissioners to go to these things multiple times, start building these relationships and start working towards this, I think there's a tremendous appetite to get there. And I think that we need to do it to get to our congressmen, our senators, and our governors just to make changes. We look at the wild horse issue. We all have the same ideas, but we don't have a vehicle to push together. We need to get that vehicle together. Some of the more interesting conversations I had, you meet the people during the meetings, but you get to know them at the hospitality suite. And I think that that's as vital as anything. I purposely, not for the alcohol that was provided, but for the social events that were provided at the hospitality suite, made a point of not missing one and spending as much time as I could there, just so you get to know these other people. And I think that it's valuable contacts that you make, and then if something comes up, I can call and say, hey, I'm Jack from Nevada, I met you at WAFA, and I think that you have a different understanding of each other going forward, and I think those are valuable relationships to build going forward. You know, I'd like to bring more back from WAFA. It gave me a tremendous amount. I'd like to be able to share it with you, but sometimes what you learn is hard to express. But I see it. I know that it's a tremendous tool. We just need to start using it more. I'm in my second term as a commissioner. Dave's been there for 10, 11 years. Dave has the institutional knowledge, but I'm kind of looking at Jeremy saying, you know, we need to get this kid involved more at WAFA, because he's probably sitting at this table, the one that's going to be here the longest and can have the most impact with that group. So from here on out, I'd like to see, without a doubt, Jeremy makes it to everyone that he can accommodate in his schedule, and we support at least getting Jeremy there. I believe in it enough. I spend my own money to go to this stuff. It's that important to me. I plan on going to the winter meeting. Even if it costs me my own money, it's that important. So a couple of the things I learned at the hospitality suite, they've had a couple of bear incidents in Arizona that have led to some deaths, and they're not pleasant. You can read about them in the paper, but you sit down and talk to these guys about the facts of what happened, and it's disturbing. And I don't ever want that to happen in Nevada. So that's valuable information that at a future date we may need to share and get some more information out of our partners in Arizona. And when people come at us with legislation, just start putting them out facts of how these things occurred and why they occurred and what the results are. They'll bother you. So that's what I have to say. Mr. Mayor, what can you add to what Dave and I have said?
Yeah, I don't want to prolong it too much. I guess one of the things, I actually would like to hear your comment. You sat in on the EOC, Sage-Grouse EOC meeting, and I know, Jeremy, you did at the midwinter. What was your impression on that meeting and the synergy that was there with all the various actors?
It's a hard one to say because we had the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service there, and I think everybody in the room was on the same page, and my interaction with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and Ted Cook in Nevada didn't really mirror what I saw from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the national people, and that's one thing that bothers me a little bit. I wish that it wasn't that way, but they play their cards a little. Ted's pretty open, and here it is on the table. And from what I got out of that was all the states were saying the same thing, and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service holding their cards pretty tight. I don't know if that's what...
Well, and I'm glad you said that, and that's why it's absolutely essential that we are connected at the national level right along with what's going on at the state level. Because of that, and if you're not interacting, you can't break that hard shell to find out what's on that underbelly.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of why I've committed the time that I'm doing, because I know Noreen calls me now, and we're, and I'm starting to get little missiles into her, and I told her that the cot, I had some serious concerns about the cot product that's coming out, because they really haven't stepped up to the plate and told us how much is enough. They told us how to maybe estimate it, but not how to do it. So I'm glad you said that, because it does point back to why we need to be involved in those kinds of things at every level that we can.
Noreen, the benefit of being new at this stuff is sometimes they don't recognize everybody and they don't know who they're sitting with at breakfast, and she just happened to pick our table at breakfast. So you're introduced to her and you get a little bit of insight. And I don't know if she was avoiding me the rest of the meeting, but I kept trying to catch her to ask some questions. I had a heck of a time trying to catch up to her.
And this is, obviously I wasn't at Waffle, but related to that, when Ken and I, or was it you and I that were at the SCI?
Yes.
Yes, at the SCI meeting, the legal group put on a program, and part of what they put on was the resumes of the individuals at the top of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And it is downright scary. The environmental backgrounds, and you just look at what they, what they have done in their careers and what they're about, and you get a whole new appreciation for, why things are happening at the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service the way they are, because the people at the top are not like us. And
is this a political thing, Mike, or is it a generational
actually
thing?
These are career, weren't they mostly career? These were career U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service people, and it might be a good idea. Maybe we can get a hold of that. Mm-hmm. Maybe you can call. I think it was WAFA. It was the WAFA. Yeah, and get that, and we take a look at it, and it might help you understand what you're dealing with.
When you come out of wildlife school, you can be from the production end or the preservation end, as you know. And a lot of people that get into the Fish and Wildlife Service have more of a preservation bent than a multi-use.
And I think, if you're able to attend these things and sit in and hear people talk, for us it's the commissioners mostly. There was a discussion. I don't want to get in on on wolves, but the bottom line is that Arizona's going through an issue where there's a plan to reintroduce, is how it's targeted into areas where the animal has been in the past. And I think that folks in Arizona are generally accepting of the fact that it's probably going to happen and needs to be done properly, like it has happened in the north. But what's happened is that the map from the Fish and Wildlife Service includes areas that aren't even on their historical range maps that they themselves have developed. So it's turned into an introduction issue as well. And if you're not at the table talking to people and hearing their experiences, your radar might not be tuned sensitive to that kind of stuff. For us, you're talking about the setup. That mindset can't prevail. It's not acceptable to prevail. I mean, I think people can. I think folks are generally accepting that, hey, these things are probably going to happen. But when it comes to the introduction, I mean, okay, who's got good habitat for introducing stuff like that? Well, Nevada probably has some. That would be, the point is that it's, you hear those stories and you're able to say, okay, I'll pay attention to that now. So,
I guess I would close by saying that there's a lot of angst amongst the directors in the West about the Fish and Wildlife Service and their approach to Endangered Species Act and states' rights. And we have an ESA task force that is an Association of Fish and Wildlife Agency organization. We have Western representatives on there. And there's some hard feelings over bison, over grizzly bears, over wolves. We're kind of I'm worried that we might be the Oreo filling in the cookie. I've got new looking at, there's a lawsuit that was filed by the Wild Earth Guardians against the New Mexico Game and Fish. They signed off on a 10J population of Mexican wolves. But in that 10J population, the agreement was that they could take lethal removal of Mexican wolves. And evidently there's been a rub between the service and the state on how many they've been taking. And the service thinks they've been taking too many, and the Wild Earth Guardians filed a lawsuit basically saying that lethal removal is against the tenets of the environmental ESA. This is a huge deal, because why would any of us want to enter into a 10J agreement on a reintroduction or what might become an introduction if you don't have the lethal removal card to play? So we're looking at whether or not we need to enter as an amicus brief, or we probably don't have time for intervener status. But anyway, so we're various agencies, state agencies are looking at doing that. The service is there. They're working with us. They know that we have these hard edges that we need to get over. One of the things we're telling collectively the Fish and Wildlife Service director is that the problem that we have is that when you get to mid-level managers in their national organization, a lot of those people are making independent decisions that are not linked with policy direction from above. And with a big organization, you have those problems. So somebody in Nome, Alaska, where's the checks and balance? By the time those decisions get made that might affect muskox or wolves or whatever, it may not be in sync with what's going on at the national level. And I know Dan is trying to figure out how to do that, but you see it with the individual species. On sage grouse, it's threats, not the number of birds. On grizzly bears, it's how many grizzly bears do you have? Well, wait a minute, when do you recover? Well, is it a threat abatement, or do we need to get to some population figure? So there's a lot of work to be done, and that's why it's important to be involved in WAFWA and AFWA, because that gives us the avenue to really be working with the service. So anyway, I think with that, there was just so much that happened there. I do have a notebook with all the committee reports and stuff, and I am sending things to you guys as they become available, so you can read what you want to read and skim over what you don't. But
No.
And one last thing for me, Monty manned his table like he was a sentinel, right in the middle of everybody. Couldn't have picked a better spot. Doesn't even know I'm talking to him. So.
yeah.
In closing, I'm sorry this took so long. I know everybody wants to get out of here, but the Sportsmen of Nevada spent money for Dave and I and Ken to go to this conference, and I believe that we need to bring back a product to you guys, and I believe that without a doubt this is something extremely important with everything we're facing. Horses, wolves, bears, sage grouse, fire, pinyon juniper. We have so many things in common. We need to work at it in common, and I think we'll get a more result working together, and this is a vehicle we can get there. So with that, we'll move on to agenda item 14B.
Yes, go ahead, Scott. I missed that, but who all attended from Nevada? It was you two guys, you three, but and Cox and Wasley, and just who all was there?
That was it.
That was it. And so we're going to get some reports from them maybe later on. I didn't know about what happened there, or is that part
we
of?
could certainly, if you want something from
I just didn't know if there was something they specifically come up with there.
Which they attended.
We were talking about attendance. We were probably middle of the road.
Yeah.
Arizona had 15 people.
Yeah, they had a ton.
Yeah, Arizona had 4 commissioners.
Out of 5.
5?
Out of 5.
Yeah, 4 out of 5. Yeah, so a lot of staff. Like I said, we were pretty much middle of the road.
And luckily for me, I had my trip completely paid for by the BLM. Has set up an account within WAFWA to pay for any director or director-appointed staff person that wanted to be there for sage grouse. So I was able to get mine paid for. And my OFWA trip in September is paid for by OFWA. So we're hilton head
Any other questions?
in the humidity.
It's like
All
a
right.
good meeting.
Very good meeting. I would encourage everybody that has an opportunity to attend. We are limited by budget, but if we, if I use my airline miles to keep that cost down and just try to travel as cheap as we can. I think it's valuable for as many of us to see it, but I also think it's valuable to keep one person engaged. So,
Is it
okay.
once a year, Chairman?
it's you have a winter meeting.
And that's in Tucson. It's in January, so it's not that far away.
It's usually like
Not
the
too far.
second week of January.
I'd like to go to one.
Remember the
Yeah,
dates.
that's Tucson, and then the summer
Just wanna let
meeting.
you know those.
Where's summer coming up?
Pardon?
Where's the summer?
Nebraska.
It's Nebraska in July, and then the following year it's in Texas. No, I'll think of it. No.
San Antonio?
Yeah, Corpus Christi, Texas will be the winter meeting. For Nebraska, it's going to be, well, that's right, it's going to be in Tucson. So that's what
And
it
then in a
changed.
few years, it will be in Nevada.
2015, and we're already planning. Cindy Delaney, the event planner, is coming out on the 27th of September, and I'm going to spend the day with her. And we've been talking about possibly having the winter meeting in Vegas, off the Strip. There's a big agency commitment just to staff the hospitality suite alone.
We can do that down in Vegas.
You know,
Here, easy too.
So-
the hospitality suite's really not a joke. It's the place to
Everybody
get to
meets.
meet
You
people.
get
And
things done.
I mean, every place else you learn things, but the contacts you're going to use going forward occur at the hospitality suite. Okay, now we'll go on to 14B. Wild horse update. Chief of Habitat Elmer Bull.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For the record, Elmer Bull, Chief of Habitat for NDOW. Horse report, things are relatively quiet on the horse management issues. The good news, currently the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is gathering horses and burros off of the Sheldon National Wildlife Refuge, which is really good news. They were supposed to gather about 180 horses this last week, and then move on and take off 75 feral burros off of there starting the first week of September. But the really good news is that the Fish and Wildlife Service obtained a $1 million grant through their own agency, and this grant was intended for invasive species removal, and it was good to see that they considered horses and burros an invasive species. And the service intends to ultimately, by 2015, the goal is to take all the horses and burros off of the Sheldon National Wildlife Refuge. They're still about $800,000 short on the amount of funding that they feel that they'll need to do that, but and they're currently looking for additional sources of money. So anyway, that's good news for the Sheldon area. I think they're also looking at beefing up the fencing around the perimeter of the area to hopefully at least minimize reinvasion by horses and burros coming in from outside the Sheldon. But good news there. At the last meeting, I reported on the Jackson horse gather that was going on. That was finally completed. They removed 647 animals out of the Jackson horse management area. That took that population down to an estimated 283, which is still about 70 horses over the high appropriate management level. So it was progress, but certainly didn't get them down into the AML range. But I guess it's better than nothing at this point.
And then on that Jackson gather, I did check with Jim Jeffers and others. That thing was gathered like 6 years ago, and it already blew up that big at another time. So that's 2 emergency gathers in a matter of no time on the same range. That
Well, it's generally figured that the herd will grow 20% a year, so in 5 years they're going to double. So.
And I think they even said in some cases 3 at Wafla. They were
3 years?
3 years.
Yeah, that could very well be.
Which is phenomenal.
Yeah, I was really interested in hearing, how much discussion went on about wild horses at Wafla. We did provide some information to a gentleman named Bill Knowles from the Arizona Game and Fish Department about wild horse issues. But I think, and talking to Ken, I think he said that that's probably going to be a more prominent.
We'll talk about it in just a minute, because that's the update that I kind of deferred to here.
Okay.
When Arizona gave that presentation, he was talking about how bad it was in Arizona, and he said, our only consolation of being in Arizona is we're not in Nevada.
Yeah, that's not something we want to be noted for. Glad we're not you. So anyway, yeah, I'd be interested. I know Ken mentioned a little bit about it at staff meeting the other day, but there's a proposed gather by the BLM in the Desatoya Range east of Fallon, supposedly in mid-August. They propose to gather between 450 and 525 horses off of there. The population currently is 651. AML is 127 to 180. So if they're successful in doing that, things will be good. However, they do intend to release 127 of those back after administering fertility control drugs and doing some sex ratio skewing, as they call it. So they are going to take a fair number off of there according to their plans, but not going to get it back down to AML, that's for sure. Battle Mountain District. There are a number of horse gathers planned for the Battle Mountain District in 2013. However, the BLM is currently working with livestock operators in that district to reduce the number of livestock out on that range because of very, very poor range conditions. Very little green up out in a lot of that country this year, and the BLM is looking at range conditions and saying we need to get some relief from the livestock. So they're contemplating also doing some horse gathers in that area a year ahead of schedule or so. We'll see if that materializes. As far, excuse me.
Elmer, while you're on that topic, do we know within the Battle Mountain District, because they're under this drought order, how many of their herd management areas are over appropriate management level?
I don't have that, Jeremy. I don't. I suspect unless the recent gathers have been done, it's a fair likelihood that they're over. But I don't have those.
Beyond that, we're looking at the fires in that district. We're looking at everything, and they're pulling cows off the range, and some of it's in our vital sage-grouse habitat where they're over. I think we need to start documenting through letters to the BLM and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. You're pulling cows, we're having fire, we're in drought. What are you doing with the horses? I think we need to turn the notch up a little bit, and I mean, we need to start pushing. I know that we do,
yeah,
but I don't know if we need something coming from us, or we need to start pushing a little harder.
Yeah, I think we'll have a discussion on that under agenda item 16.
The last item I've mentioned at the last couple of meetings that the Nevada Association of Counties is contemplating possibly moving forward with some kind of legal action against the BLM regarding the lack of horse management or appropriate horse management. Checked in with them yesterday. Not a lot of progress there. I think I mentioned last time that they had hired a legal counsel to explore just where they stand and whether they have standing in some kind of an action like this. She told me yesterday that they're putting together a letter that they're going to send out to various agencies and county governments and try to assess just what the impact of the lack of horse management is having on different agencies and counties and the economies of those areas. So I suspect we'll be seeing something from them, but they're moving very, very slowly on this. Not a lot of action there. That was all I had on the horse situation.
Go ahead, Commissioner McNinch.
Okay, so I'll try to be brief, and Ken, you're going to have to help me finish this, but part of the commissioners' forum, that became a big topic, and it, like Jack said, the commissioners are wanting to find ways to not get out in front of the directors, because that's not how the WAFA works, but to get in behind them and help provide some power to push through some of these things, and that this is the one the one subject that everybody kind of glommed onto, and they were going to forward as part of the business meeting, which I wasn't there to hear, proposal to do some kind of a summit. It's not quite the right word, but provide a forum to have high-level BLM officials attend with commissioners, and or even start more basic with congressional delegates. Anyway, start a process to say, hey, look, before we start filing our lawsuits and we start coordinating, as you can see, we're all talking together and starting to coordinate our lawsuits. We want to find out what we can do to help you, BLM, deal with the challenges that you face, which is the lawsuits that they're continually getting, and on their roundups, and how they're, what can we do to help with that, and how can this system be changed to make it more functional and make it do what it's supposed to do. So Ken, I don't know what ultimately came out of that, but
yeah, we're seriously trying to put together something for the winter meeting. There's some political considerations that came up at the business meeting that we need to be careful about, as you can imagine, because they'd like to have a congressman or two
right.
come and put them on the spot a little bit.
Right. Yeah, that was kind of the point, is to elevate this using the contacts that a lot of the commissioners have, and seeing if we can start building a better understanding actually with the people that are providing the funding, and actually putting people in places and positions, and seeing if we can affect change that way, because the threat of lawsuit gets some reaction for a little while, but it's not a long-term solution,
In the spirit of kind of following along with something that you said, and how the commissioners might be able to help directors and with the governors that they have relationship with, I got an email from the Department of Tourism encouraging me to have staff look seriously at grant funds that were available to help Madeline Pickens establish her horse sanctuaries in Nevada, and the potential revenue source that would come to Nevada as a result of these private horse sanctuaries. And I said thank you very much. And so we have a disconnect between the realities of what it means to Nevada's wildlife and resources in the rural areas, with people that are looking at the economy of the state that may come from Vegas that have no concept of what this really does mean. And it puts, another cabinet member in kind of a tough spot when you have to say the baby's not as pretty as you think the baby might be. It's a baby. But so, providing that kind of feedback, I think we need to get the feedback outside of the group that we all live with day to day, and to other folks that have control over the direction of government.
Yeah, about every roughly 2 years, I think this commission has come up with some form of a letter that it is issued about wild horses and what we should do about it to various agencies, the different things. And that's one issue that I don't think this commission or commissions that had totally different makeups in the past, I don't think there's ever been a dissenting vote on any of these items dealing with horses. And I think that, when you come up with people like our veterinarian there yesterday that was talking to us, he had some ideas about it. And I think all these organizations, like the cattlemen's and whatnot, should be encouraged to maybe, when we come up with a suggestion, hey, you guys need to write somebody about it. The best thing that I've found to do is, hey, can you draft us a letter of what you think we should write about it, put it on our agenda, and see if we like it. For the most part, that's happened on a couple other issues. If they're interested enough in it, 98.9% of the work is done. You come in, you change 20 words, and you move on. is they've been very good in the past, and I think they might be willing to do such thing. Also, we have a policy number 67, which basically, commission policy, sets out general guidelines for use of things dealing with wild horse, and, some of them are tough to do. But it's basically, when we get over AML, we need to do something about it. And, you read them, and it's nice to have it written down on a piece of paper, but since we have no authority over it, but nonetheless, something worth kind of going over those and thinking about ways that we can accomplish the goals of those policies. And maybe dealing with anybody that's asking us issues about wild horses. And so I don't think that you guys could write a letter that I would disagree with dealing with wild horses. So we just get them on. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else have anything? You're good? All righty. You'll stay up there and we'll go right to wildfire. Item C.